So my name is Matt Eyring. I'm the Chief Strategy and Innovation Officer at Vivint. And we're a, is that still on? Is the sound on? Is the sound on now? Yeah. All right. Somebody give me a signal if it goes off again. We are the largest smart home company, so in the segment of the Internet of Things, or in the market of the Internet of Things, we're the segment that competes in the residential area. So we were really happy when we saw the solar example that just came up. We spun off a solar company a little while ago, and I am the person who runs the part of our business called the Innovation Center that's in Lehi, Utah, that develops our technology in the core smart home business and starts companies like our solar business. I didn't start that one, that was before my time, but we've started up a wireless ISP and a couple of other businesses. So I'm in charge of both the R&D and all the product side of our current core business, and also how to kind of create a factory or a metaphorical factory to start new businesses. So I'm really grateful to be here today. The reference was made to the fact that we're a community, and this is a nascent industry, so I really do believe the time in which the walls will come up here and we'll have hundreds and hundreds of people. But I'm grateful for the pioneers, and I'm especially grateful for UStar, I'm grateful for Grow Utah, I'm grateful for UVU. I am, and the other sponsors that are here, I am a huge fan, I'm an unabashed public fan of this university. As I hope you are too. As a real innovator, UVU was a place that, you know, when I was here, it was a different place. When I left 20 plus years ago for the East Coast to work, and I came back 3 years ago, and I think amazed is the only word that comes to mind. The other word that comes to mind is innovation. This is a community and a group that's not afraid to take risks, that's not afraid to bet on talent and young talent, not afraid to think a little bit differently, and we're so grateful to be part of that innovation community that's here today. So thank you very, very much for attending and for letting us be part of this. We are a community that needs to get all the crabs out of the buckets, I guess. So home to us is kind of this, and hopefully you too, is kind of this amazing, almost sacred space where life's great events happen, all the highs and all the lows. And the job, we think, of technology is to make sure that it doesn't inhibit any of those moments, that hopefully it helps and improves the connections, reduces the stress, but that doesn't get in the way of the kind of stuff that we just showed there. So that's a kind of a North Star and a vision for all of us who work there. I have some of my friends here who run product and user experience that have come to be a part of this important event, and we really, really believe that in our souls. Now that being said, there's been a lot of hype about the so-called Internet of Things. Right after I took the job at Vivint, there was a Wired article that came out that you may have also read, and they've got to sell magazines, so maybe this is a little bit of hyperbole, but if you read this, when the objects around us can talk to one another, the elements of our physical universe will converge and spring to life. In time, this network will grow to fulfill our needs, understand our desires, and enable our dreams. And then they add, it's closer than you think. And this is in June 2013. Well, I'm here to announce it's not ready yet. We're getting there. We are working, you know, if you pass by I-15, and don't do this because you'll crash because we're not right on the side of the freeway, but if you pass, you'll see all of the lights on through floors 1 through 5, and people in there coding and working really, really hard to make it happen. But we're not quite there yet. If you just look, if you use some of the smart home equipment yourself, or if you read any of the popular press about what's going on, you'll see that there are still friction points, obstacle points that exist. You know, TechCrunch says that the latest efforts to harmonize the smart home don't succeed in simplifying implementation. It may put this thing on ice for another 10 years. The New York Times says, whatever brand you choose, know that nothing will work exactly as it should. Expect random errors and mysterious failures. Verge says home automation's a mess, same as it's been the last decade. Fortune says it's still the stuff of science fiction. There are a bunch of barriers that exist, and I was a consultant the job before. I started out as a product manager in my career at Medtronic, but I've also been a consultant. So I like to sort of dig into root causes, what's going on, and how can we fix those things. This isn't a sort of mutually exclusive, comprehensively exhaustive list of every barrier that exists. Specifically, it's missing some things around pricing and putting together some of the marketing such that the market takes off. But I wanted to talk about a number of factors specifically related to the product that are friction points in making this a mass market, which is what we're all trying to do. And again, this is in one side of IoT. There's another big B2B side, but at least in the residential smart home side, here are a few of the barriers. We're in need of a user interface revolution. So I'll talk about that in just a second. We need some killer use cases. Every tech market starts off thinking about the consumer first, and you have to find mass adoption for some great use cases. Easy installation. This stuff is still way too hard to install. Product and system reliability, including interoperability, is not there. And security and privacy. So in the short time we have together, I just want to go through some of these elements and how we're thinking about reducing friction in each of these areas. And it's a team effort across companies and really across the industry, but I'd like to give you at least our latest thinking on how we jump over these barriers and create a mass market. Every mass market tech revolution is accompanied by a user interface breakthrough. And what do I mean by that? We need to go back in history a little bit, and let me just prove that to you, or at least make my point with a couple of examples. Does anybody recognize this computer? I thought if I put up mainframes with punch cards, maybe I'd have 0, but anybody here that does anybody know what kind of computer this is? Can anyone give the brand of computer here?
Commodore.
This is a Commodore. Can anyone describe using these early Commodores?
Frustrating.
Frustrating, and why?
There was no good user interface. Everything was just kind of clunky. You had to know the machine better than it knew itself in order to use it.
That's right. You're sort of loading things up with very little memory, the disk drive. It's either in a mode where it's got a prompt or running a program and nothing in between, right? And so it's a world that appeals to folks here on the left side and not on the right side. And this is a little extreme on the left side. I like the fact these guys are wearing suits, which is where the industry started out. But the question is, how did we get from here to there, and with the PC? We had a TRS-80, by the way, in our home. None of you know what that is, but Radio Shack was on the cutting edge at one time, believe it or not. All right, so this is what happened in this industry. Someone came up with a great user interface metaphor that matched the way technology works with the way human perception works. And one part of it was the desktop, the GUI. Someone said, you know what? The human brain really doesn't connect with command prompts and file structures and code as much as it does with a metaphor. And the metaphor is, you kind of can imagine a desktop with paper stacked on it, and you can imagine the ability to move those things around and manipulate them. And so one of the things, it's not everything, but one of the major things was a great user interface, a combination of a graphical user interface and the mouse that began to bring this product into the mass market, millions and millions of units. Let's look at another industry. In 2006, can anyone name the best-selling phone on the market in that year? It's not that long ago, by the way. For you students, you were still Nokia. Here's one more hint.
Razor.
The Razor. And was this phone hot?
Oh yeah.
This phone was very hot. This phone was really hot. It was sold starting out as a niche, fashion-forward item. And I don't know, this tells you, by the way, career lifespans. Does anyone even recognize the people behind me right now? There's a few hands going down. We've got David Beckham, we can never forget. I think we have a hotel heiress on the left here. Fergie, probably, and I don't know, maybe Reese Witherspoon, okay? But this is telling you right now, how many units did this phone sell in total? 130 million. They lowered the price on this phone, and it was about as hot as a tech product gets, but it was able to do some of the things a smartphone could do. So you could browse the internet, listen to some music, get email, but how well did it do each of these things? Terribly, poorly. It was a complete fail, okay? So it had gone to sort of niche and bigger phone adoption, but the smartphone market and really the hundreds of millions of units had not arrived yet. And what happened in 2007? Steve Jobs got up and gave a speech, and for the tech enthusiasts, some of you may have been actually watching this one live. This was of great interest. And many of you may have been using these phones that are up there behind me. And these phones were pretty awesome. I don't know if you can remember the endorphins coming from using the Palm Trio, but they were there at one time. You felt them. Yeah, you saw that new BlackBerry and you were blown away, right? But these were devices that really had cheap plastic buttons. The user interface was clunky. Could you surf the web on these things? Do you remember? You could kind of scroll down and see ESPN.com. But how was it as a user experience? It wasn't great. We really needed a revolutionary UI, what Steve Jobs is talking about here. And I thought this, I'd just written an article that was published in the Financial Times about how you should never pre-launch a product with huge hype. You have to launch it, find a small market, pivot, and adjust it. I thought this thing was going to be a fail. That I was completely wrong. This was a monster hit, and it worked like magic. The multi-touch interface did for this market what the GUI and the mouse had done for the original personal computer. It's just to sort of underscore the importance of a great UI in causing a revolution. So my question right now, of course, and the one you're thinking about, hopefully, after spending a couple hours today, is, so what's going on with the smart home? What is the killer user interface that's going to take this from really a couple of percentage points of adoption to mass adoption? Anybody have any ideas?
Voice.
Let me go through for just a second. As you ponder that question, let me go through for just a second the current state of the interface that we have right now. So what do you use to control the smart home when you're out of the home right now? You got the phones. How does it work, those of you? Do any of you have a smart home and you're using the phone?
Yep.
How does it work? It's okay. It's with you all the time, which is nice. And you're able to access the home and do some things. You have apps. It's fairly flexible. When you're in the home, you've got to use this interface, right? So you've got to use an interface that's controllable. And it's a little easier than getting the phone out of your pocket. For those who are very young and very old, they need to have an interface in the home. If you've got an alarm going off and you've got a 6-year-old, you better have a panel. And then my wife used to make fun of me when I came because I said, I'm working for a smart home company. I'd be next to the light and I'd turn the light on and off and she'd say, watch this. So this is a better user interface than the one you came up with. So some of the smart switches that are local to the device are actually really, really helpful. But it's still remote control, right? This is basically not a smart home at all. It's just a home that's offering us remote control. So back to my question. And somebody there in row number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 got it. What is the killer interface for the home? Vivint, turn the lights on, right? I don't have to get a device out. I don't have to go to the wall. I just say, turn the lights on, and what happens? Beautifully animated light bulb pops up, and boom, you're there, right? So that is really the killer interface. And if you were at CES, you saw a product begin to get traction. Were any of you walking around torturously logging time at CES? I mean, true geeks. Isn't there anybody here that's trying to CES? So the Amazon Echo is the first far-field device. So far-field's really a pretty tricky technical challenge, like $100 million technical challenge, to be able to hear somebody's voice. You know, the brain and the ears and the brain are doing some pretty sophisticated things when they're pulling a voice from distance with other noises around. And Amazon invested heavily in that product. It's a product that we've integrated with. The next step pushing forward beyond just a great UI is a great UX, a great user experience. So it's not just saying I want lights off and on. That's a little annoying. I mean, you're not going to sit going in your house, light on, light off door. You don't live quite like that. It's a little more natural to say something like, Vivint, I'm going to sleep, right? And then there's a series of things that need to happen after you say that. What needs to happen? The door's locked, the system arms, you conserve energy, and the lights are off. A step even beyond, so it's a series of things that belong to a state in the home. And that's a user experience step that's a little bit further along than just controlling point objects. Even beyond that, some people have said, well, wait a second, it's 9 o'clock. I can have the home automatically do a number of things, which works pretty well. All of a sudden, it's 9 o'clock, and all of these things happen. What's the problem with that scenario? Well, if I'm sitting in bed reading Harry Potter, I'm like, this is a really, really good book, and I just got to keep reading. 9 o'clock comes, and what happens? Well, the house arms, that's fine, door's locked, but all of a sudden I am freezing in the dark, right? And so it's not just a great UI, it's not just a great user experience, it's the fact that we have to get past that to add real intelligence to the system. This is also a fail. So what you really need is, Vivint, I'm going to sleep, and what happens? Nothing. Nothing happens. Say, Vivint, I'm going to sleep. And the AI, the machine learning, begins to kick in and begin to take sensor data and says, where is everyone? Especially if there are sensors in the bed, and there are cheap ones now, you can begin to say, not just, okay, I see the intent is to go to bed. You can actually begin to tell where is everyone, and what are their prior patterns at this time, so I can learn from day to day and from time period to time period what I really should be doing. So once that happens, you need to mix in feedback, and in the human-robot interaction, you've got to worry about a couple of things, and they are, how much autonomy are you going to give the robot? How much does it check in? What voice does it use? How often does it bug you? What is it asking? In robotics, they have this term called levels of autonomy. So you have to say, is it going to check in and ask me something and then do something? Is it going to tell me then do? Is it just going to take the wheel? All of these things have to be figured out. Here's just a simple example of language. We detected it's time for sleep when we perform shutdown sequence. I think this was actually pulled from some real robotics example. It's a little stilted, as the English majors here would say. Too mechanical, too technical, no personality. You've got to get the details right. Looks like you're ready for some shut-eye. Sleep tight and we'll take care of the rest. It's very, very interesting. I gave a talk at another in-state university to the social scientists, and it was an interesting talk that you might not have given 20 years ago. These are folks in cognitive psychology, human factors, other people, and what we talked about was the fact that the liberal arts is going to play a big role in IoT and smart home because you've got to get this interface exactly right. Okay, so it's going to be a mixture of natural user interface, voice, this communication, getting it just right, and artificial intelligence. The melding of those three things is going to produce this killer revolutionary user experience that we've talked about. And that's a little bit my message on that one box. And we and a lot of other folks are going after that very, very programmatically and very, very hard right now. All right, let's talk about killer use cases. So I used to be a management consultant, as I said, and I read a lot of old Harvard Business Review articles and academic articles around innovation. One of the most famous is by a guy named Hal Levitt. He wrote an article called Marketing Myopia, where he talks about how the train sector went out of business because they thought of themselves as a train business and not a transportation business. So people want to get a job done in their life and they hire a product. They don't care about your product. So people want to buy the hole, they don't want to buy your drill. And it's really hard when you're a drill producer to say, what do people want? They want drills. No, they don't. They want holes. And there's a lot of different ways that people might be able to get holes. So one of the first things you do, and I saw in this contest people doing a great job, is to start to say, what is the job to be done that my product is being hired to do? You never start from technology out. That's a big pitfall. Here's a bunch of case studies. I won't go into all of these, but think about these. Does anybody remember Google Wave? What in the world was that, the job to be done there? Part messaging, part Twitter, part Meetup, part email. Unclear and vanished, gone. The Segway. That was a product with a lot of hype. That did not make it. What was the job to be done with the Segway? We could do a whole hour on this one alone. I want to take any answers. Anyone have any idea? It wasn't Paul Blart Mall Cop, day one. These guys were going to revolutionize transportation. There was a book written about it, codenamed Ginger. So but you really have to think, do people really, is the job to be done to get around like that in an inner city situation? Or is it something else? And it is finding some niche applications now. What is the job to be done of having Facebook take over your home screen? Got to think about that. That's an old, you guys don't recognize, you don't even know what these are. You're like, it's an 8-track cassette now. This is a beta max tape. There's a few people in here be like, oh yeah. And there was a standards battle. This was the highest quality tape. Beta actually had a much higher quality level, but what was the job to be done? It wasn't to have the highest quality level, that was overshot. It was to have compatibility amongst a lot of machines, and this product didn't win the standards war. So you just need to think through, first of all, what is the job my product is trying to solve and get that right. I had my team just send a few examples, and here's one of them. This is a connected toaster oven that if you put a piece of meat in it, will say, it's turkey, and know what temperature to turn itself up to. And it's neither here nor there, and I hope this product is a big hit, but it's an example of, wait a second, I put the piece of meat in, so I know what it is. I probably know more or less how to cook it. But again, it's thinking first from who's the consumer, what are the jobs to be done, and moving to what the product feature functionality needs to be to meet those jobs. So you got to be careful that you miss everyday problems. We talk a lot about the chaos of daily living. And living is more chaotic, I think, than even it was 30 years ago. And these icons are meant to represent it. There's money worries and car shuttling and bills that have to be paid. And one of the things we try to focus on is we want to protect, connect, conserve, bring families together, and ultimately save them time, money, and give them back control. And we try to focus very, very closely on what the job to be done is. There's a number of ways that you can filter to find jobs to be done. One of them is life stage. A person who's single is living in a different way and has different jobs to be done than a person who's an empty nester or a person with a baby. You get a baby in the house, the tail is wagging the dog. And a lot of your jobs are around protecting, making sure everyth's okay, and making sure you're getting enough sleep, just frankly. You get a little more sleep on the second baby than you do on the first. But so the life stage is another one. Time of day is an important one, so daily routine. Let me just go into leave for a brief moment and how you would think about this. So if you said, Vivint, we're leaving, or even better, if you just left, does this add a lot of value? Is this an important job to be done? You tell me. So here's a sequence. Here's somebody that has to grab their keys. She's grabbing another bag maybe in the morning because she has to work out at the gym. You've got to deal with the door. You've got to deal with the lights. You've got to deal with the temperature. You've got to protect the home. How much time is consumed in aggregate during your life doing these things? A tremendous amount, right? And so the notion here is that the jobs are based around these filters, these life events. Leaving can be one, and then you need to aggregate a bunch of different solutions. There's a debate in the market, or at least there was when the market was early, are point solutions going to win out or integrated solutions going to win out? Most of the jobs to be done that we're seeing in IoT related to the home are solved by having a whole integrated collection of devices. We sell a doorbell camera, but we just don't sell a doorbell camera. With that doorbell camera, we sell a garage door opener. We sell a lock, and the reason for that is when the FedEx person shows up and you talk to them, you're going to want to have that garage door go up and be able to leave a package or unlock the door and let someone in. It's the same in this situation. You want to look at all of the different things that the person does at the center of the equation. And when you're leaving, again, it won't do anything immediately. We would watch the garage door or the mudroom door, and we would say, okay, there's an observation window. We do a statistical analysis saying what are the odds the person has really left. We watch the garage door go up and down. We watch the car leave, and then we can perform these actions. So we don't trap a person with a false alarm. Let's talk about easy installation. Here's how the market is rolling out. You've got, as I said, you have to have multiple devices to install. So you got to have a lot of sensors to know the state of the home and the intent of the user. And you've got to have a lot of actuators, just like in robotics, things that change the temperature, that unlock the door, cameras. So there's a lot of things to set up. Where you place things is really, really important. You're not going to get great data unless you have enough sensors with a quality install put in the right places. And they have to work together. If you walk into a Home Depot right now or a Lowe's and you read, they literally have a chart up there on how the devices interact. And Z-Wave and Zigbee and I don't understand any of this. You got to make it easy for the consumer. Just a quick case study. The people that do this, we think the very best, are partners of ours. We sell their product, which is Nest, which is owned by Google. They have thought this thing through. I mean, they provide you a screwdriver. I'm sure Great Design Company helped them with this, like IDEA or somebody else. They have very clear instructions, but you get to one page in the instruction book, and it's anytime you read this, your market's going to shrink a bit. Failure to turn off the power may result in serious electric shock, injury, and death. So, this notion of how do you make installation drop dead simple. The metaphor that we like to use internally is kind of like Transformers. We want that thing out of the box and flying on the wall and perfectly installed with as little friction as possible. We want it to self-configure as much as we can. And again, this is sort of a dream, but if you had something with NFC where essentially you could just tap it, it would auto-configure. You'd have to log in the minimal amount. It would work right out of the box. It would know who you are. It would test itself and show that it has a reliable connection. These are all things we're sort of striving to hit. In the meantime, we use humans. So we have installation and folks that can come into the house and sit down and actually make sure that you have a perfect install. But the world we're really looking for is that transformer world where those objects come into your house and they're very, very easy to install. Product and system reliability. This is an amalgam of all the feedback we've ever received from consumers. Here it is. You don't have to read our thousands of pages of feedback. It just needs to work all the time. All right, so we will not have a mass market if we're having quality problems. And what do I mean by that? Look at some of these articles. 6 new routers that can handle your smart home needs. 5 reasons the smart home is stupid. New thermostat glitch leaves users in the cold. Wi-Fi connectivity has been and is a huge problem. I mean, you don't want to lose security to your house if the Wi-Fi isn't working. You don't want to freeze to death. Inconsistent AI. This funny article, and this is a woman that's interviewed me several times, just said, my husband wants to divorce me as a product reviewer because the house starts turning on the lights at 2 a.m. because it still thinks we're on vacation and it's doing its security mode and all these things. So you've got to get the AI and the machine learning right. It's not dependable. And this was a Nest glitch that they actually had, which set the temperature down to, in the cold, cold, cold weather, the device drained battery power and left people 60 degrees, 50 degrees in the middle of cold spells. So this is stuff that we've got to fix. Here's security, which is really, really important. There was an Accenture study with the 28,000 people that said 47% of them would think twice about getting into a smart home if you didn't solve the security and privacy issue. People don't want their data sold, at least in individual cases, let alone aggregate cases. And then people are concerned that these devices are secure. You'll read in articles about folks who can look up databases of one-off devices that aren't encrypted, that have default passwords where you can go right in and look at the phone, which is very, very scary for a lot of folks. So there's many, many things that we do and are doing to make sure that we've got a private network. We have our own Wi-Fi router in the hub, and we encrypt those communications that are going out over Wi-Fi to make sure things are as secure as possible. This is a trade-off. It's always a trade-off with cost and time and innovation. How fast you're going to make sure very pedestrian things like patch updates and authentication and encryption are taken care of, but extremely, extremely important for mass adoption in this industry. Vertical integration, vertical integration is important at the early stages of industry evolution. So if you look at the early days of computing, I don't know if anybody's messed around with an IBM 360 or before then, the mainframes. But IBM owned what's called the whole technology stack and the service stack. And why would they do that? Henry Ford actually owned all the stack of cars. He owned rubber plantations and steel mills, and you're like, why do you need to do that? And the reason is when an industry starts out and its performance trajectory isn't good enough, the products they suffer from all the problems we just talked about. Things aren't secure. They're hard to install. It's hard to explain the value proposition. It's hard to get the cost right. It's hard to provide good service. It's hard to get use cases right. Industries tend to what's called vertically integrate. I don't know if we're in the section of the campus that's the business school, but what situations is vertical integration helpful? Usually in the early stages where performance isn't good enough. So one of the things you'll see early on is that companies that own all of the technology stack and all of the service stack will come out ahead. And you see this again in many, many industries. And at Vivint, one of the reasons I came on a couple of years ago is we were making a play to own the back end, the cloud, and own all of the technology stack in addition to the service stack, doing the financing ourselves, and that provided a bit of a competitive advantage, and that's the one other thing I think you'll see in the industry. So that's a very fast run through of smart home, and I appreciate very much the opportunity to talk with you about it. Hopefully we can all together make some of these things work. Anyone have any questions?
Right here, over here.
We have a question. Yes.
So we heard a little bit from Monet earlier about, he was giving an example of, you've got kind of the three different phases. You've got these sensors that can tell you information, you've got the predictive, and then you've got almost the automated, where they can figure out, when to send out, service vehicles with full tanks of gas and things like that. And it's really giving you that ability to learn from the data in the best way possible. So obviously it seems like that's the direction that Vivint Smart Home is going. But kind of where are you guys at in that AI learning process, and how are you applying that?
Really interesting question. And I've struggled my way through a lot of robotics papers and research and dissertations. Looking for the answer to that question, so it's sort of a deep question. It may differ a bit for the B2B segments where you're scheduling or sending a truck out, or you're refueling or whatever. But I think our point of view on smart home, the residential side, is it's a spectrum, as you said. It's all the way from I'm going to ask you every time until I do something, to I ask, then do. I tell you I'm going to do something, then if you don't respond, I do it. You move up the chain to I'm just going to go ahead and do this. when
That's
they're
where
in
it kind of gets scary, right?
Yeah, it does a little bit, and my view of it, and we could have a long, rich discussion on this, and they call that levels of autonomy, is that at least in the home environment, some degree of interdependence gives you both a better solution and is more human. Meaning, it's very, very hard for that robot, we'll call it, not to make a mistake at some point. And the first morning that they're overflowing on coffee, or you're getting dressed and the blinds go up, we found that users really say, I'm done. And so you have to be careful moving people up, and our philosophy is you move them up those levels of autonomy. So if I've told you a million times, if I walk in from the garage and I flip on a light and it says, hey look, I'm noticing every time you come in the garage and you open a door that you flip on these lights going into the kitchen, can I just do that for you and do it all the time? It's been a relationship conversation, and then it's pretty low risk. But there are other cases where I never want to move to full automation. And I think in robotics, people have sort of thought, or at least some folks have said, pure automation is the ideal, which is complete independence. And I kind of think, well, for humans, we call that autism. I don't know if we ever want to get to the stage where interdependence is probably a higher ideal than complete independence of the machines from the humans, at least in the home environment. But it's a great question that we've talked about a lot and tried to bring some experts in on.
Quick question.
Yes?
So how do you think the smart home, and great presentation by the way, how do you think
Thanks.
the smart home will affect home services?
That's another great question. Here's my prediction, and I'll make it, I'll make it now, and then maybe somebody can dig an archive up and say I was wrong, or right. But I think there are a lot of services, if you look at people who are on the cutting edge, I think Amazon is one such company, and I admire them a lot. It's a hard charging environment, but they're great innovators. They've come up with these dash buttons, I don't know if you've heard about them, and these replenishment services where if you have a Keurig coffee maker, or if you had, over time a washing machine or something, things get replenished automatically. And the dash buttons are actually Wi-Fi communication that you can stick somewhere and say, I'm out of Tide, just hit the button and it orders. I think you're going to see more types of services like that than you would imagine. Imagine, knowing that your filter on your furnace might need to be replaced. I mean, it's not something you think about, but it's something that could cost you money if it's not working right. But you just don't know. There's intelligence that's there in that machine that you could be told. Think about when something breaks or is about to break. Think about calling people over for maintenance. The list goes on, and I really think that there is a hardware play here, but I think in the long term, this business will be funded from a lot of that, intelligence that saves the consumer money. Peak demand response is another example, where you can turn the thermostat down and save you money if the grid is experiencing load. So it gives me money in my pocket, which could subsidize the purchase of that hardware up front. And then the people who are owning the platform could also be taking revenues from some of these purchases that are made potentially. But I think a lot of the industry over time, and it'll take a while, a couple of years, will begin to revolve around that exchange and those services. You have to be careful. People care about privacy. They want to be very certain that they're in control at all times. But I think there'll be a large economy grow up around that data, around those services, and around providing value to the consumer through the smart home. It's a great question. Yes?
What is your framework on the transition to smart homes? In other words, do you envision a transition period where people use intermediate smart home technology?
Yeah. I wish everybody in America would go buy a new home. So we, it's a great point. I think that the deep smart home integration will happen as new homes get built, because people are going to say, gosh, I can get a lot better sensor placement and get it a lot cheaper and a lot more convenient if I'm not retrofitting. But the truth of the matter is only a certain amount of the housing stock turns over, and so that's a slow way to start a revolution. In the meantime, we've got to make it, that transformer bit that I put up here, we've got to make it as easy as possible to get that retrofit, and then say, what are the killer use cases? What are the core guts that you really want to have? I mean, it'd be nice to have sensors in all the beds, and it'd be nice to have all this other stuff, but what are the core things you really need? And I think those are things like lights, locks, temperature, the security sensors, the basics. I think the industry will be built around the basics. And my hope is that some of the things I was showing you are compelling enough, and some of them are here, by the way. Tonight I will tell my house to lock itself and arm itself and turn the temperature down through the Amazon Echo. But I'm hoping this gets somebody excited enough in just those basic use cases that we begin to be seeing 10, 20, 30, 40% adoption. That's what my folks here are thinking about day and night. Yes?
So I was kind of curious, if I look at Vivint, the business model and what you guys are doing, there's a lot of drive, or it seems for you to completely commoditize the hardware, drive that cost down, make it do all your own sensors and all these other things. So then that makes me think of two questions. One is, where are the places, or do you want to develop an ecosystem with partners and things? How far does Vivint go, right? Or do you just want to own the whole thing?
Yeah.
I forget what the second one is. I'll let you address that.
That's right.
It's like, where do you own? It's going to be, how much are you going to open this up? Like,
it's a
how
very
much are you gonna
perceptive.
open the environment?
It's very perceptive. I don't know. I've not heard that from the audience, but you're exactly right. The hardware is likely to commoditize. So, just in my humble opinion, in some ways, the market for a $250 thermostat is not as big as a market for a $50 thermostat. And so they talk about how much computing do you need at the edge. We put just enough embedded computing power at the edge so that you're not going to have to replace the object, and that we get maximum power from the platform. So some cameras, for instance, we put a little bit more, we have a new camera that's coming out, we put a little more horsepower and a little more cost in that camera. Why? Because it has two-way call-out capability. We found that kids were going actually to their door, but this is a sad commentary on parenting in America. It's just the facts. A lot of the kids were going outside on the doorstep to hit our two-way doorbell to talk to their parents because it was a bat phone. And so on the indoor camera, we put two-way talk, and we'll eventually maybe put recognition. Amazon has a service called AVS where they'll let you take Echo's cloud capabilities and embed it in your own device. But in general, you're absolutely right. And I think, where do the profit pools migrate to? I think the cloud intelligence that's integrating everything together actually becomes more valuable over time. So, am I still going, or am I?
I think we're.
All right, I got the cane. I'm out of here. Thanks very much.